Hello, Johnny Rotten here. I'm going to go into our next, I think this is number 4, about Juliet of the Spirits. We're going to play this little scene from the movie. I'm going to do, because it's in Italian, I'm going to do a little bit of a translation for you. And then we're going to watch some more, and then we're going to talk about what we see. So let's just jump right in. Here we go.
Ragazzo, accompagna il signore.
Bisogna fare le scale, l'ascensore è fermo.
Lasciamo perdere, Valentina. C'è molta gente, è già incominciato.
Lo ignoro, signora.
Andiamo? Hai preparato le domande? Le domande? Quali domande? Ma io non domando niente. Da bambina mio papà diceva che questo era l'albergo delle grandi... Valentina, Juliet, Elena! Meno male. E chi le saliva le scale al buio? Ciao, Mona. Lo sai che si è avverato tutto? Si capisce. Sì, e la stessa notte ho sognato di nuovo Sua Eccellenza, però senza l'uniforme. Che vorrà dire?
Figliuolo, ama tua moglie come te stesso, perché chi ama sua moglie ama se stesso. Amatevi l'un l'altro, nel bene e nel male, nella ricchezza e nella povertà, nella malattia e nella salute.
Giulietta, ma cosa guardi? C'è un pranzo di nozze di là. Ah, che carino. Trucco, amore.
Questo è...
Okay. So as you can see there, she was coming into the hotel, the Grand Hotel, and she saw the wedding reception taking place. So we're going to read up to this point right here where we are, and then I'll play this and we'll talk about what's going on here. Let's see. The meeting is on the terrace. Show the ladies the way. The elevator is broken. That's why they're going up the stairs. Let's forget about it. Are there lots of people? Has it started already? I don't know. Let's go. Got your questions ready? Questions? What questions? I'm not asking any. When I was little, my dad told me this hotel was for Elena. I was dreading this dark. Hello, my angel. It has all come to pass, of course. That same night, I dreamt of him. No robe, though. What does it mean? Love thy wife as thyself. Love those who love their wives love themselves. Love one another, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor, in sickness and in health. What are you staring at? There's a wedding banquet going on. How nice, love. And then we go into this scene right here. So here is the man here. And he is speaking. The thing about that last scene, why I'm including it, is because she sees the wedding or the reception. She's reminded, you even see her face kind of like, oh, it's so beautiful. And then she's reminded of the trouble that she's in and why she's, in what this movie is all about. So in the scenery, go back and pick out all of these symbolisms. Again, we've talked about Fellini and his love of symbolisms, which is soaked and saturated throughout this movie, if you will. So now we're going to skip to this scene right here. We're going to talk about this man up here. Here in the background, you can see the Bisma, right here. He's this pale-shaped, androgynous guru, kind of... what is he, spiritual, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, enlightenment and all that. So, and so he's doing the talk. He's got his partners there talking there. And so then this gentleman here begins to say, that's the second step. It isn't real enlightenment, though. So what is this? The single spirit. The fruit is only appearance. The real Buddha is beyond such differences. Is that right? That's the third step. Now, through the truth is close and far away at once. Now, though the truth is close and far away at once, So what is this? It's an apple. Or isn't it an apple? Darling, you don't get it. Because that's the lady says, what is this? And she says, isn't it an apple? Darling, you don't get it. Look beyond appearances. The voice of the master will tell you what it is. It's an apple, a humble apple, a little red and crushed on one side. But at the same time, it is the Buddha and unity. Things become things again. An enlightened being sees multiplicity and unity all at once. Appearance and substance. Is there a heaven or hell? Who are you? I'm an American painter. Let me see. Cut my head off. Go ahead, cut my head off. And they go on to say, it's one of the fables. And I'll go back and read that part. Right now we're just going to talk about the apple. So, and then we'll talk about chopping people's heads off and what all that means. So, here we go. We're going to talk about the apple. I just read to you what the script is saying. And so I'm going to play it. And I'll leave this up so you can read along if you want. Anyway, here you go. Go to this scene here, and you can see.
Ma non è ancora la vera illuminazione. Allora, che cos'è questo?
È lo spirito unico. Quel frutto è solamente un'apparenza. Ma il vero Buddha è al di là di queste distinzioni. È giusto?
Eccoci al terzo passo. Ma a questo punto la verità è vicina e lontanissima. Allora, che cosa è
It's
questo?
an apple, a humble apple, a little red.
Scusa, ma non è una mela? Ma no, cara, non hai capito. Bisogna vedere
Isn't
di
it
là
an
della
apple?
forma.
Look beyond appearances, she says.
La voce del maestro ti dirà che cos'è.
The voice of the master will tell us what it
È
is.
mela,
And then you hear him.
soltanto umile piccola mela, un poco rossa e schiacciata
Hai
da una
visto?
parte, ma al tempo stesso è il Buddha e lo spirito unico. Le cose ritornano cose
You notice how she touches the apple to her mouth.
e l'illuminato ne vede insieme l'unità e la molteplicità, l'apparenza e la sostanza.
Esistono il paradiso e l'inferno?
Chi sei tu?
Un pittore americano.
Fa vedere anche a me.
Okay, so we'll stop it here. We're talking about the cutting off the head. So you see he's talking about the apple. It seems innocent enough, but we're going to talk about some apples. So we're going to go back to the Platonic myths, the myth of Aristophanes. And if you remember when we talked about this before, I'll read it again. It's not very long. This is what early man once looked like. In Plato's Symposium, Aristophanes delivers his speech in the form of a myth. Once upon a time, there were three kinds of human beings. Male, descended from the sun, female, descended from the earth, and androgynous, which were both male and female elements descended from the moon. Each human being was completely round, with 4 arms and 4 legs, 2 identical faces on opposite sides of the head with 4 ears and all else to match. They walked both forwards and backwards and ran by turning cartwheels on their 8 limbs, moving in circles like their parents, the planets. As they were powerful and unruly and threatening to scale the heavens, Zeus devised to cut them into two like a sorb apple, which is halved for pickling, and even threatened to cut them into 2 again, so that they might hop on 1 leg. That made me think of this. I gotta pause for a second. That made me think of this.
You stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look, it's just a flesh wound. Look, stop that. Chicken. Look, I'll have your leg. Right. Right, I'll do you for that. What? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me?
Anyway. Oh my God. Ha ha ha. Okay, gotta have some fun. So, it says that he even threatened to cut them into 2 again so they might hop on 1 leg. Apollo then turned his head to make them face towards their wound, pulling their skin around to cover up the wound and tied it together at the navel like a purse. He made sure to leave a few wrinkles on what became known as the abdomen so that they might be reminded of their punishment. After that, human beings longed for their other half so much that they searched for it all over. When they found it, they wrapped themselves around it very tightly and did not let go. As a result, they started dying from hunger and self-neglect. Zeus took pity on the poor creatures and moved their genitals around in the front so that those who were previously androgynous could procreate, and those who were previously male could obtain satisfaction and move on to higher things. This is the origin of our desire for other human beings. Those of us who desire members of the opposite sex were previously androgynous, whereas men who desire men and women who desire women were previously male or female. When we find our other half, we are lost in amazement of love and friendship and intimacy that cannot be accounted for by a simple appetite for sex, but rather by a desire to be whole again and restored to our original nature. Our greatest wish, if we could have it, would then be for Hephaestus to meld us into one another so that our souls could be at one and share once more a common fate. Okay? Sorb apples. So I had to look. What's a sorb apple? Well, sorb apple comes from a European fruit tree, also known as a service tree. Well, that's interesting. So I have to look it up. The autumnal fruit that makes a questionable homemade liqueur. This is an article about a guy that found the fruit and decided to make a liquor out of it. Kind of interesting, but he talks about it. There are two types of sorb. One is delightful Slavonic people who lived in Germany's beautiful spree-walled and pressed the seeds of the comic blue flax to make salad dressing. And the other is a species of rowan known as the service tree, or the Sorbus domestica by botanists. It turns up very occasionally in the woodlands of southern England and Wales, where tremendous efforts are made to conserve the few remaining specimens, which is rather unnecessary since the trees are not native to the British Isles, but probably just escapees from medieval monastery gardens. The service tree in full autumn beauty is a staggering sight. The fruits hang down in clusters, rather like its cousin, the common mountain ash or rowan, but the individual fruits are much bigger, the size of a large cherry, and they usually ripen to red on their sunny side. The species is native to Mediterranean hills, especially Italy and Greece, but you also see it inland throughout the Balkans and much of southwest France. The leaves look like any other rowan, long and pinnate, and produce a bit of autumn color, but not much. Anyway, it's the fruit for which people grow it. So he talks about that a little bit. So it's been around a while, but that's interesting. That's what we talk about. So Sorbus domestica, you can see here, is actually a very beautiful tree. I can see why. Look at the foliage, the leaves, and the apples. They do kind of bunch together. Isn't that interesting? And it's got some more images where it grows. So I just find this is interesting to learn about, different things. Or another thing that I'm thinking of when I think about the apple is, of course, I Pet Goat. If you're familiar with this, there is a scene with an apple here. I'm going to play it for a second. Oh my, I forget that sound is so loud. You can see she's looking at the apple. What happens? Oh man. Oh man. Look at that. And the apple cuts in half. Oh my. Let's go back and look at this. Do you remember? What did we just... Okay, seriously? Oh man. Oh, there we go. Cut in half. right? That apple was cut in half. And when they find each other, they wrap themselves together. Where did it go? Right? And they move on. Oh, maybe it was in a different article. Nonetheless, here we go. So when we're talking about this one, oh man, I'm gonna sneeze again. Hey. Okay. I reminded these two halves, and they are reaching out to each other. And what do they make when they meet? What do? Oh, they make a lotus flower. Imagine that. Symbolism everywhere. Look that up if you're curious. But that really, this image right here makes me think of exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, what they're talking about with the apples. This beautiful apple. Okay, so the apple, significance of the apple. The unnamed fruit of Eden thus became an apple under the influence of the story of the golden apples in the gardens of Hesperides. As a result, the apple became a symbol of knowledge, immorality, temptation, fall of man, and sin. What's the apple represent? Oh, whoops, no, we're going to keep going here. What does God say about the apple? How then did the apple become the symbol of temptation and sin? The Standard Version of Genesis chapter 3, verse 3 through 5 says, "But the fruit of the tree, which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." And, this is a fake apple right here. Look at this paint, wooden lines. Don't touch it. Don't eat it. It's fake. It's not real. It's a fake apple. Symbolism of fruit. Fruit appears in myths from around the world, often in a symbol of abundance associated with goddesses of fertility, or the goddesses of fertility, plenty, and the harvest. Sometimes, however, fruit represents earthly pleasures, overindulgence, and temptation. And this made me immediately think of every movie I have ever seen. What's that old comedy? The History of the World, all those kind of things. And they show, they bring out the big giant baskets full of fruit, the cornucopia of fruit in the basket, right? Put the fruit in the basket. And they would, that was, the rich had this, right? So they just had an abundance of fruit in baskets. And you imagine, feeding the gladiators, grapes. I know they weren't doing that with gladiators. I'm just saying the idea of that in your mind, the king and, and the abundance of fruit. So clearly fruit is a metaphor for a lot. The spiritual meaning of an apple, aside from religious symbol, didn't say biblical, said religious. The apple is also an ancient fertility symbol. It represents love, temptation, and spiritual growth. To eat the actual apple means acquiring knowledge and dreams of younger people. The apple represents sexual desires and strong sexual energy you must release. And okay, that's what our movie is about. So whenever I see, I Pet Goat, and I read any of the things that people have given their interpretations of it, they're not wrong. Right. I have some I Pet Goat videos when I first started doing this, just to kind of practice, where I pointed out some of the differences. And this is where I noticed this isn't a real apple. It's clearly painted. It looks very folk artish. Now we're talking about these two. I'm just showing you that there's different symbolisms besides what an apple might represent. And so many people keep talking about the same symbols when they look at this image of the apple. And I'm showing you that, hey, just in this little video alone, I've shown you 2-3 different things that had never been considered in this one little scene. So let's keep going. Apple. Is this what we just did? I think so. Yeah. All right. So, apple represents duality. So that's what he was saying. The video was that it represents duality. It's both, Buddha and unity. And so I put that in. Apple represents duality. And here's what I got. I click images. And you can see that you get a lot of the, manifestations of the physical form and the art of duality. You're going to get the yin and the yang all of this. We've even got, going deeper. I mean, you can find lots of things about apples. Apples aren't just here at Lake. We've got, kind of some Einstein's, theories and relativity. We got the apples, and we got apples and apples and apples. Okay, so clearly we're on the right path. The apple has a lot of references. And in this movie, Juliet of the Spirits, we're learning all about it. Apple is good and evil. In the Christian tradition, consuming the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the sin committed by Adam and Eve that led to the fall of man in Genesis 3. This depiction may have originated as a Latin pun, but eating the malum, apple, Eve contracted malum, evil. Okay, so that was interesting. Good and evil. We know about this, the good and evil tree. And did you realize, though, that the myth of Aristophanes is also talking about an apple from a tree? The orb apple, or what was it? The sorb apple. I find that interesting. Let's see. Oh, here we are. So again, find that interesting. We've got some apple symbolism. Here is this it? Here it is. That was an extra, I'm sorry, it was an extra tab. Okay, so that made me think, when I was looking at these images here, we've got the apple. So I was like, what does that mean, right? And so I search it. We all know. We think we know. We think we know. But then there's more to the story. There's always more to the story. It's not just so simple. It's not, duality has a lot of variables in it. The first bite of the apple represents the fall of man. The apple symbol and the Apple computer logo symbolizes knowledge. Rob Janoff, the designer of the Apple logo, claims he didn't explicitly intend a biblical reference in the Apple logo, meaning when he created the logo in 1977, he didn't have to. Well, I find this interesting because I've heard this before. He was the designer of the logo. He didn't explicitly intend it to be a biblical reference. What I find interesting here is that the apple is not explicitly a biblical reference in the first place. So I find it a little bit egotistical, egocentric, whatever you want to call it, that so many people automatically assumed that he was talking about a Bible apple, as in sinning, as in the computers are sinful, which maybe they are. Who knows what the meaning is? But it can go all the way back here. It's a little round apple men cut in half. Hermaphrodites. Or, I'm sorry, not hermaphrodites. This is androgynous. Totally different. So there you go. So that's interesting about the apple. I find it a little, there's a lot of people that saw this logo before it made it on the computer. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And nobody mentioned that, hey, do you think that? Yeah. He didn't explicitly intend. Not biblical. I don't know. Whatever. So, oops. Oh, man. Over here. Oh, you're going to be a turd like that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, then so now we're going to go into the next scene of Juliet. So we talked about an apple. I think we're pretty much dissected the apple up a good bit. We're talking about duality. We're talking about unity. We're talking about multiplicity, seeing all things at once. It's both an apple and, what is it? What is it that you say? Right? The fruit is only appearance. The real Buddha is beyond such differences. That's the third step. So, isn't it an apple? Darling, you don't even get it. Look beyond appearances. The master will tell you what it is. Yep, things become things again, and the enlightened begin seeing multiplicity and unity all at once, appearance and substance. So the next part of this scene, I think you get what we're talking about with the with the apple here. And so the next thing, we drop from the apple, and then, oops.
Sei tu?
Un pittore. Un pittore.
Okay. And then the woman here, you'll see her in a second. She then says, is there a heaven and a hell? Right? The guru says, and then she says, who are you? And he said, this gentleman in the audience is an American painter. And then she says, let me see. She hands him a sword and says, cut my head off. Go on, cut off her head. The other gentleman says, it's one of the fables of the great master, Lao Tzu. Don't hesitate, cut it off. Behold, the gates of hell are opening, and now the gates of heaven. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about next. So, let's watch it.
A vedere anche a me. Tagliami la testa.
Cut off my head. And then she's going to lean over. What do you mean, cut your head off? Huh?
Avanti, taglio della
Go ahead, cut off her
Gli
head.
apologhi del Gran Maestro Lao Tse.
The Grand Master.
Coraggio, taglia.
Ecco si aprono le porte dell'inferno.
And that's when she says, open the gates, or behold, the gates of hell are opening, as he's about to cut her head off. Why? What does that mean? I know you want to know. Well, so did I. So I had to check it out. The Great Master. I found this book, Shadow Strategies of an American Ninja Master. There was another one, but I lost it. Whatever. So we're going to read this because I thought this was a little bit interesting. Oh, where is it? It's talking about the art of war. It says the Taoist concepts oppose the conduct of war as economically wasteful of wealth and lives. Well, I would agree with that. It is the conduct of war is waste of money and lives. Sun Tzu recommends cutting off the head of the snake before it can grow dangerous. When people are outnumbered by superior force, which holds their ground, assassination and terror become a pragmatic choice for those with no desire to be owned by the conqueror. During the Genpei Wars in the 12th century, Iga was overrun by the samurai of the Northern Emperor, creating a new underclass of formal nobles and indigenous people to be exploited. As well as the Tokugawa shogunate of the 16th century, these events contributed to the disappearance of the ninja, which is the martial traditions. The ninja of Koga were renowned as samurai skilled in small group tactics and the cracking of fortresses. The ninjas of Iga were samurai greatly respected for personal combat skills, the gathering of intelligence, the strategy. The ninja of Kumono were seagoing warriors, whalers, and traders. This is what I found cool. The women had skills that were seldom recorded in patriarchal society, and like those who pledged allegiance to the Southern Emperor and lost their places in the new social order during the wars. Historical references to the kunoichi, the female ninja, are difficult to find. Mythology indicates that the kunoichi used disguises similar to their male counterparts, finding the roles of priestess, actress, and geisha particularly useful for gathering intelligence. The men occasionally disguised themselves as women. And that made me think of Joan of Arc. So if anything, this tells me that throughout history, the same stories we've heard over and over again, we just keep repeating them. And not only are they just stories, but some of them are based on facts. Some of them are. Most of them are. They're all based on some kind of fact, right? So, if the Chinese can have their own versions of female ninjas or Joan of Arcs, it makes sense. It's something that happens everywhere. I just thought that was kind of cool as a reference to this little, cutting off of a head here. And then I found this. The Gates of Paradise. She says here, is there a heaven and a hell? Let me see. Cut my head off. Go on. Cut off her head. It's one of the fables. Don't hesitate. Cut it off. Behold, the gates of hell are opening. That's what she says. And then he stops and she says, now the gates of heaven. Here we go. A soldier named N, I'm going to call him, came to H, I'm going to call him, and asked, is there really a paradise and a hell? Who are you? Inquired H. I am a samurai, the warrior replied. You a soldier, exclaimed H. What kind of ruler would have you as his guard? Your face looks like that of a beggar. N became so angry that he began to draw his sword. But H continued, so you have a sword. Your weapon is probably much too dull to cut off my head. As N drew his sword, H remarked, here, open the gates of hell. And at these words, the samurai, perceiving the master's discipline, sheathed his sword and bowed. Here, open the gates of paradise, said Hakun. Interesting, right? These have so many different meanings. We don't even know all of this. I couldn't even begin. I have so much respect for the writers. You know, even the iPad Goat guy, the amount of knowledge that this person has, the amount of knowledge that Fellini has in his symbolism. Unbelievable, because I know a lot of things. And every day, especially doing these videos, I have learned way more than I ever imagined possible. So if you do listen, you do watch, I appreciate it, because it really is fun for me to do these. It's almost like my own personal diary. Instead of my journals, now I'm able to just sit here and do and almost share, you know, this is what I would do except normally, and I just write it down in a notebook, and now I'm actually able to do my research and just say, hey, you know, here's 20 minutes, here's 40 minutes of some crap that I found interesting, someone else might want to know. Because I'm curious. I want to know everything. All right? I want to know why. Why everything? My dad. Can you imagine that my dad, when I was a kid? Will you stop asking me? I've said this before in videos. My dad, I had the encyclopedia, I had dictionaries, was always going to the library because I'd ask my dad, what is this word? I'd be reading something. I'd go running in there, you know. Dad, what's this word? And go look it up. And then when I would, you know, need to know how to spell something, like if I was writing something, I'm like, Dad, how do you spell this? Go look it up. And I'd be like, if I can't, but I don't even know how to start. So he would make me look. So if it was like K, but it sounded like an N, like K-N, and the word was no, for example, my dad would make me go look it up. And I'd say, well, Dad, does it start with a K or an N? And he was, go figure it out. That's what oh, anyway, with all that said, I'm going to end with this because I found this to be so beautiful and so amazing. I wanted to share it with you. Rode in the gates of hell. We're cutting off heads. We're Dante Infernoing. You have no idea just how entangled all of this really is. And this is absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to share this, and then I hope you learned something new. And I will work on doing some more videos as I have time. Here you go. Rode in the gates of hell. That's so beautiful. I'm going to watch it again. Oh, whoops. Oh, whoops. I guess I needed to start it over, didn't I? Is it going to play now? Or did I already watch it? Now it's not going to play? Oh, my. I'm sorry. There it goes. Oh, there we go. Okay. Till next time.
We're at the Musée d'Orsay, and we're looking at a cast from 1917, the year that Rodin died, of his The Gates of Hell, which is this huge project that the artist worked on for the last decades of his life that he never finished. And in fact, we're not even sure how it fits together because it was found in pieces in his studio.
We're looking at a plaster cast. It's impossible to think about doors without thinking about Ghiberti's doors on the baptistry of the Cathedral of Florence, which were called the Gates of Paradise because they were so beautiful. Because, of course, those depict biblical scenes from the Old and New Testament, but here we're really unmoored from that tradition, from that iconography.
Well, it's a literary tradition, and it's referring back to Dante, but ever so loosely.
So we have Dante at the top there.
Right, he's in the tympana. That's also a standalone sculpture, which is called the Thinker, and is here Dante gazing into hell. We should actually say this was a commission, and this was intended to be for a building on the site of the Musée d'Orsay, which was to be a museum of decorative arts, which was never built. But this was a commission that Rodin got, and when he had finished the design of the doors, he was ready to cast it, but then the project itself fell through, so he kept working on it, and the sculpture continued to evolve.
You do see so many figures that you recognize as standalone sculptures by Rodin, but the thing that strikes me most is just how much the figures emerge from the background of the doors. And I said background sort of in quotes.
And the doors should be in quotes.
And the doors should be in
because
quotes,
they
right.
could never function
But
anymore.
it's like the doors don't even look like solid forms. They're like vapor from which these forms emerge and spill out into our space.
It's almost as if we imagine the surface of those doors to be the surface of the ocean. Waves coming forward and these figures rising and then falling.
Right.
And there's this constant sense of motion and undulation. Form taking shape and then receding into indistinctness.
Eternal becoming.
The standalone figures that we're seeing are tragic. We have Paola and Francesca, Ugolino.
The figures who Dante finds in hell, being tortured and punished for their sins on earth.
All the way at the top, instead of angels, we have three shades. These are figures that repeat. One figure that's seen 3 times, almost cinematographic, but creating a unified form with shoulders that actually create a flat plateau and 3 arms that pull our eye down into the gates themselves.
I'm so reminded of Michelangelo when I look at all of these figures and the expressive power of the body, especially the male body, and also the way that some of the forms are fragmented reminds me of looking at ancient Greek and Roman sculpture.
This is a really modern reinvention of sculpture. Yes, clearly informed by Michelangelo, clearly informed by the classical, but this notion of the fragment itself, reuse, reworking, very much a modern notion.
The forms, although derived from the narrative of Dante's Inferno, come to take on a more universal significance about the human condition, about suffering, sin, emotion, and the power of the body.